At the family dinner, my parents wouldn't shut up about my brother's new 4-bedroom mansion. The pool's heated, the drapes are from Italy. Mom beamed like she'd built it herself. Forks clinked, laughter circled the table, and for a moment I was 12 again, forgotten, invisible. Then she turned to me, her voice dripping honey. "Vanessa, wouldn't you love to stay there sometime?" The table laughed. I didn't. I set my fork down, calm and steady, and smiled just enough to make them nervous, because they didn't know the truth yet about who really owned the street they were bragging about. Growing up, I used to think silence kept peace. In my family, peace meant letting my mother's voice fill every room and never daring to interrupt. Elaine Cole. My mother believed her son Daniel hung the moon. If he made a mess, it was boys will be boys. If I came home with straight A's, it was that's what's expected. It took me years to realize she didn't hate me. She just didn't see me at all. Our house in the suburbs always looked perfect from the outside, fresh paint, trimmed hedges, the kind of place that made neighbors wave. Inside, though, it was a kingdom built for one golden child. Daniel had a bedroom twice the size of mine, walls plastered with trophies from teams that never won. Mom clapped the loudest for him, even when he barely played. I remember standing in the hallway once holding a blue ribbon from my science fair, waiting for her to notice. She didn't. She was too busy icing a cake to celebrate Daniel's effort after failing a math test. Dad Robert stayed quiet. He loved us both, I think, but he loved calm more. His way of showing care was driving me to school, when Mom forgot, or sneaking me candy when she scolded me for being too sensitive. I used to wish he'd say something just once to even the scale, but silence was his armor. Only one person ever looked at me like I mattered, Aunt Margaret, Dad's sister. She was the kind of woman who carried quiet power, single, successful, never needing anyone's approval. On my 12th birthday, she gave me a small leather notebook and said, "Write down every goal you have. One day you'll show them instead of telling them." That notebook became my map out. By high school, I stopped chasing Mom's praise and started chasing results. I studied business, earned scholarships, and worked 2 jobs while Daniel coasted through college parties and family-funded internships. Mom called him ambitious. She called me stubborn. After graduation, I took my savings, bought a tiny duplex on the rough side of town, and learned how to fix leaky pipes and strip paint. I didn't tell anyone. Every property I bought after that was another secret, another brick in the quiet empire I was building behind their backs. By 34, I owned 6 properties across Sioux Falls, including 3 in the exact neighborhood where Daniel's mansion stood. Mom thought I lived in a modest downtown apartment and drove a used car because I never cared about appearances. She wasn't wrong. I just cared about control more. Still, part of me hoped one day she'd ask not to compare, not to brag, just to know me. But that question never came. Instead, I got dinner invitations filtered through guilt. Every visit meant hearing how Daniel's doing so well, how his wife Lauren keeps such a beautiful home. And now, sitting at that very table, I could feel the years pressing down, like the weight of every word they'd ever ignored. Because tonight, my silence was about to mean something entirely different. The dinner started harmless enough, or at least that's how it looked from the outside. Mom floated around the dining room like she was hosting a royal banquet, adjusting napkins that didn't need adjusting, bragging about recipes she'd perfected. Dad poured wine without a word. Daniel, of course, was the star. His wife Lauren laughed too loudly at everything he said, brushing imaginary lint off his designer jacket. Daniel's backyard renovation was just finished, Mom announced proudly, slicing into her roast like she was cutting a ribbon. They added a pergola, a fire pit, and a koi pond. Isn't that amazing? I smiled politely, the same practiced smile I'd worn for years. Sounds nice. Mom's eyes flicked toward me. You'd love it, Vanessa. It's so different from that, what do you call it, cozy apartment of yours. There it was, the jab wrapped in silk. I took a sip of wine instead of answering. Lauren leaned in, chin tilted. You should come by sometime, really. We have so much space now, you'd finally see what a real home feels like. The table laughed. Dad gave a small, uneasy cough. Aunt Margaret's fork paused mid-air, her gaze darting toward me. Just one look from her said it all, breathe. I stared at my plate, cutting small, even bites of roast I no longer tasted. Every sound in that room sharpened the clink of cutlery, Daniel's smug laugh, Mom's tone drenched in pride. I'd lived this loop my whole life, the subtle digs, the way they turned my success into invisibility and his mediocrity into legend. Mom wasn't done. She reached for her wine glass, swirling it like she was waiting for the perfect cue. "Oh, speaking of the house," she said, eyes twinkling, "Daniel tell her about the marble countertops. Imported, you know, from Italy." "Sure did," Daniel said, flashing his grin. "It's something else. Maybe Vanessa can stay there for a bit. You'd love it, sis." And then the line that snapped something deep inside me. Mom turned to me, voice sweet as syrup. "Vanessa, wouldn't you love to stay there sometime?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel in sound, but it was cruel in intent. Everyone chuckled, waiting for me to give my usual polite nod to fade quietly back into the background. But this time, I didn't nod. I placed my fork down carefully. The small click against the plate was louder than any word I could have said. Aunt Margaret caught my eye again. Her expression didn't change, but there was something steady behind it, permission. I leaned back, taking a slow breath. For the first time, I wasn't swallowing the humiliation. I was storing it, measuring it, waiting for the right moment. Because if they wanted to see what I'd built, I'd show them on my terms. When I drove back to the city that night, the road lights blurred against the windshield like ghosts I couldn't shake. My mother's voice still echoed in my head, sweet, cutting, final. I turned off the radio and let the silence fill the car. That silence used to mean defeat. Tonight it meant control. By the time I reached my apartment, my jaw ached from holding in everything I wanted to say. I poured myself a glass of water, set it down untouched, and opened my laptop. The glow lit up the room, the only light I needed. Property records, spreadsheets, mortgage documents, my world spread out across the screen like a quiet empire no one knew existed. There they were, 6 addresses under my name. Duplexes, condos, family homes, all rented, all profitable. 3 of them stood in the same luxury neighborhood where Daniel's mansion sat like a crown jewel. The irony almost made me laugh. I clicked through each document, my pulse steady. "They think success screams," I muttered, but sometimes it whispers. Aunt Margaret called just before midnight. Her timing was uncanny as always. "You holding up, kid?" she asked. "I'm done holding up," I said. "I'm holding proof." She chuckled softly. "I figured. You've been too quiet for too long. What's the plan, dinner next week? Mom's hosting again." A beat of silence. "Good," she said finally. "Make it count." After the call, I sat back, staring at the city skyline through my window. The glow of downtown Sioux Falls pulsed like a heartbeat. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed late at construction sites, chasing contractors, cleaning drywall dust off my shoes, while Daniel was out buying another luxury car on Mom's dime. I remembered every snide comment about how real success meant living big, showing off. I had built everything quietly, brick by brick, for moments exactly like this one. I reached for the old leather notebook Aunt Margaret had given me years ago. The cover was worn now, the pages yellowed. My handwriting had changed from careful to certain. On the first page, I'd written, "One day they'll see." I smiled, flipping to a new page. "Tomorrow they will." I spent the next day gathering paperwork, title deeds, financial statements, tax forms, everything notarized, sealed, perfect. I wasn't preparing to brag. I was preparing for truth, the kind that doesn't need to shout. When the next Sunday rolled around, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the collar of a simple navy dress. My reflection looked calm, but my eyes were sharp. "No anger," I whispered. "No tears, just facts." The drive back to my parents' house felt shorter this time. Familiar houses passed like scenery in a play I'd already outgrown. The closer I got, the lighter I felt, like every mile peeled away a layer of old restraint. By the time I pulled into their driveway, I wasn't the overlooked daughter anymore. I was the storm they'd never seen coming. The house looked exactly the same. Same red brick, same porch light, flickering above the steps. But that night, I saw it differently. It wasn't home anymore. It was a stage, and I was done playing the quiet supporting role. Inside, the same smell of roast beef and rosemary drifted through the kitchen. Mom was humming, setting the table with her best china. Daniel was already there, glass of wine in hand, his wife perched next to him in a silk blouse that screamed effort. Dad stood near the counter, pretending to read the newspaper. Aunt Margaret sat at the far end, expression unreadable. Vanessa Mom greeted that sugar-sweet tone, coding every syllable. "We were just talking about Daniel's upcoming open house. You should see it. It's stunning." "I've seen it," I said, simply slipping into my seat. Dinner began the same way as last time, boasting comparisons, invisible jabs. The conversation was a polished loop I'd heard my entire life. The only difference was me. I wasn't flinching anymore. Daniel leaned back, flashing his practiced grin. "We're actually thinking of adding a guest wing soon," he said, glancing at Mom for approval. "Maybe you can stay there sometimes, Vanessa. Get a feel for what success really looks like." Mom laughed, the kind that meant she agreed but wanted to sound polite. "Oh, Daniel, don't tease your sister." Then to me, "But honestly, honey, you really would love to stay there. It's so much more spacious than that little apartment of yours." There it was again, that familiar sting wrapped in kindness. I smiled. "You think so?" Dad's eyes flicked up. He knew that tone. Margaret set her fork down slowly, as if bracing herself. Mom kept going, oblivious. "Of course, it's just, that place of yours feels so temporary, dear. You should see what Daniel's built. 4 bedrooms, a pool, marble countertops, the works." "From Italy," Lauren chimed in. "We imported everything. You can really feel the difference when you live with quality." Silence followed for a beat too long. I placed my napkin beside my plate, folded perfectly. "You're right," I said softly. "You can feel the difference." Mom smiled, proud of her successful lecture. "Exactly. You see, it's all about, because I own 2 houses next door to his." I cut in my voice, calm even. "And one right across the street." The room stopped breathing. Mom's smile froze like someone had unplugged her mid-sentence. Daniel blinked, the grin slipping. When I leaned forward slightly, meeting his eyes. "You heard me. 2 next door, 1 across. Which one do you want to stay in?" The sound that followed was pure silence, the kind that fills every corner of a room until it presses against your chest. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. Dad's fork clattered softly onto his plate. "Vanessa," he started, voice low, uncertain. I turned to him gently. "Dad, I've been buying property for over 10 years, all on my own. While Mom was funding Daniel's 3rd business idea, I was working 2 jobs, fixing rentals, saving every dollar. I didn't need the family's help. I just needed space to build." Lauren let out a nervous laugh that died halfway. "You're kidding, right?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a small folder, sliding it across the table. Inside were the property deeds, stamped and notarized. "Not kidding." Daniel's hand trembled as he flipped through the pages. This can't be real." Mom's face flushed pink. "Vanessa, how could you? How could I?" What I interrupted, still calm. "Work hard. Keep my success to myself. You taught me that. Remember, you always said good girls don't brag." For the first time, Mom didn't have a comeback. Her lips parted, then closed again. I continued, my voice steady. "You've spent your whole life bragging about what Daniel has. Maybe you should have paid attention to what I was doing." Aunt Margaret's smile was small but proud, her eyes glinting with something like satisfaction. Daniel shoved the folder away. "You're lying. You rent that apartment downtown." "I do," I said. "Because it's smart. My tenant's rent pays my mortgage. I don't need to live in marble to feel successful." Lauren's cheeks burned red. "You're making us look ridiculous." I tilted my head. "No, I'm just making things honest." Mom finally snapped, voice sharp as broken glass. "You're being disrespectful, Vanessa. This is not how family behaves." I laughed quietly. "Family? You mean the same one that never saw me, never believed in me, never once asked how I was doing, unless it made Daniel look better?" "Respect works both ways, Mom." Dad cleared his throat, the sound trembling. "She's right." Mom's head jerked toward him. "Robert, don't start." "No," he said louder now, a firm edge I'd never heard before. "You've been blind, Elaine. You turned our daughter into a ghost in her own home. Look at her. She didn't need our help, and she still built everything you claim to want for Daniel." The room fell silent again, heavier this time. Mom's eyes glistened, not with remorse, but humiliation. "You ambushed us." "I didn't," I said quietly. I just answered your question. I pushed my chair back slowly. The legs scraped against the tile, echoing through the stillness. Enjoy your dinner. And Daniel. I paused at the doorway. I'll keep the porch lights on just in case you ever need to rent one. Behind me, I heard Lauren's sharp inhale, Mom's muffled gasp, and Aunt Margaret's faint chuckle. Dad didn't say a word, but when I glanced back, his eyes met mine, proud and sad all at once. Outside, the winter air hit like freedom. I stood in the driveway for a moment, staring at Daniel's house gleaming across the street, the same mansion they'd worshipped all evening. Only now, under the streetlights, it didn't look so big. As I got into my car, I caught my reflection in the rear-view mirror, steady, unflinching, the kind of woman I used to wish my mother could see, and maybe, finally, she did. 3 months passed before I heard from anyone. By then, word had spread quietly through town. Daniel's mansion had been listed for sale. A friend in real estate called to confirm what I already suspected. He'd taken out a second mortgage to keep up his image, and now the debt was eating him alive. The house everyone bragged about had become his burden. Mom stopped calling after that dinner. She sent one text, "You humiliated us," and I never replied. Dad reached out weeks later asking to meet for coffee. He looked older, tired. "I should have stood up for you sooner," he said. I didn't answer, but I didn't walk away either. That was enough for both of us. As for me, I poured my energy into something new. The Horizon Fund, a scholarship program for kids who'd been told they weren't enough. The first 10 recipients stood on stage with me the night we launched it. Their parents clapped with pride, the kind I used to wish for. When the applause faded, I stood alone under the lights, calm, weightless. The mansion, the dinners, the silence, all of it had led here. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's steady. It's peace. That night, I drove past Daniel's old neighborhood. The porch lights from my properties glowed softly in the dark, quiet proof that I'd already won. I didn't feel angry anymore, just free. For the first time, silence didn't hurt. It healed. If you've ever had to prove your worth to the people who never saw you, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments and hit subscribe, because every quiet victory deserves to be heard.